Hi, Jenny.
Hey, Sarah, happy Friday.
Happy Friday. How's it
So,
going? I love this.
yeah, this will be fun. So, we talked about getting together kind of as sisters, but also as chiefs, which is why we're wearing our chief paraphernalia. And we're going to do some questions back and forth, kind of just about like being a woman in leadership positions. And then we'll do a little speed round at the end. And we decided to do our chief sweatshirt instead of bathrobes because I think you have a bathrobe, right? I have a bathrobe.
That might be
That would
weird.
be a little weird.
Yeah.
So, okay, so let's jump right in. So first question is kind of more general. How do you feel like being a woman has impacted your leadership journey?
Yeah, I think this is such an interesting question. And I also wonder if I feel like if I had answered this question 10 years ago, I might have a different answer. And if you ask me 10 years from now, I might have a different answer. But I think when I think about it today, I think there's two things that really jump out. And one is, and this is not totally unique to women, but it is something that I know really over indexes with women, but is kind of the battle between climbing the ladder and like fighting some imposter syndrome along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And I have learned a lot about that over the years. And as I have learned about it, I have definitely learned that all of the data shows that it is very much over indexed again for women.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's been really real for me. I've figured it out, but it has absolutely been a part of my journey. And then I think the other thing is, there are some realities for a lot of women in terms of like what's happening outside of work. And, I am super lucky, as I know are you, to, be in a family where it really is a partnership and there's a lot of balance and a lot more balance of responsibility between spouses versus what maybe some people deal with, but
shout out.
That's right. That's right. Shout out for involved husbands. But, that notwithstanding, I do think that, I absolutely carry some mental load of everything happening on the home front. I think about, the other executives who I have sat beside for many years. And I know this is true for a lot of women. And I think of actually some women in my chief group and stories they've told me that are much more extreme than my own. But the majority of them are men who have wives who stay at home, who manage the household. And even when you have a balanced management, there is still a difference between managing half of a household while you're working versus, having someone else managing the whole thing. So that has definitely been, I realize that is something that's happening in the background through everything. And I do think it has kind of a cumulative effect sometimes. What about you?
I have a thought, but I want to like touch one of the stories. I don't know if you remember, well, I'm sure you remember growing up, one of our family stories has been, we had a grandfather who was a physician. And I'll mention I'm a psychiatrist. And you remember the story, he would come home and like the children would be quietly in their pajamas ready for bed, and the dinner would be like hot on the plate and the beer would be crisp and he got to sit quietly. You remember that story, yes. Right? Like how different is
every day one bowl of beer. Yeah, right. Versus like I am, I will definitely take a call. I mean, I've worked remote, which is another story for like a long time. It is not uncommon at all that I'm like, hey, can I take this call on the phone instead of Zoom? Because I'm going to go and like chop some vegetables or
right.
fold the never ending pile of laundry or do that stuff. You're right. Like so opposite from all of what you just said. Yeah.
So that's a funny family story. In terms of like, for me, I mean, I was thinking a lot about this question, and I think that growing up, and maybe you've had, I think, the same experience growing up, it didn't really occur to me, like being a woman, like I never really thought about it. I was pretty comfortable when I went into science. Like I was normally the only woman or maybe one of a couple, and that just seemed kind of normal to me. And I never really thought about it much, frankly. And then when I kind of got into higher levels, especially C-suite level work, then it became really noticeable. And it wasn't just being the only woman in the room. So I think that I've seen a lot more obstacles, like you said, just kind of the everyday stuff that the older generation of men, or some men currently, I guess, or maybe some women currently just don't have to do. but I see a lot of opportunity. And sometimes I see that being a woman in a leadership position, people underestimate you. And that can be really powerful. Sometimes you can really use that to your advantage. So I do see a little bit of a flip to the coin. But did you feel that way growing up as well? Like, I think our family was, I don't know, I didn't really feel that growing up.
Yeah, totally. And like, you have to give, I think some real credit there. I don't know that was, and we have another sister, right? So like family of 3 girls, we used to joke, right? There were 3 cats too. So it was like our dad and like all these.
Oh, that's right.
Cats. Remember that all the cats were girls, but
yeah,
yeah, right. I don't think that was ever something that, felt front and center, or that ever, you felt like, well, you shouldn't do this because you're a woman, or maybe you can't do this, or any pressure that you should go and not work and only stay at home. So yeah, you're right. And I think it's only as I've gotten later in my career that I have recognized some of the actual differences. I really think had you asked me that 10, 8, maybe even like 5 years ago, I would have said, no, like, I don't know what all these people are talking about, that being a woman has an effect. And I think with age and time come wisdom, I guess, but I do think it's there.
And we'll just shout out to our other sister who's not a chief, which is why she's not on this call, but she's also a leader. So maybe that'll be another day. And like you said, maybe a shout out to some of the strong women in our family and our immediate family that helped us feel that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And dad. I don't think it was just the women. I think it was the dad.
Oh yes, I definitely
don't forget about
him there. Dad, we don't want to forget about you.
Yes.
So you mentioned in the last question that you are working with younger women and you like see yourself in them, or you think about like, what do I know now that I didn't know then? Like, what would you say now, or things like you would tell a version of yourself back then?
Yeah, so many things. So I think the first, and I don't want to only talk about the imposter syndrome issue. I'll start with that because I do think a lot of women work through that. I think it is that if you are feeling that, first of all, like do a little bit of reading about it, because for me, I found that to be so helpful once I recognized some of what I was working through and actually read about it. And it's one of those things where you're reading and you're like, oh yeah, that's me. It just normalizes what you are feeling and helps you for me, it really helped me get past it. And also, again, if for people who do struggle with that, figure out like, what is your strategy going to be when you start to, because as you keep growing and as you keep elevating, my experience has always been like that little imposter syndrome will creep up a little bit again, and then I'll figure it out and I'll squash it. And then, you elevate one more step, or you're in a new room that you've never been in before and you feel it again. So kind of figure out like, what is your strategy on how you are going to shut that down as fast as you possibly can. It for me has made a really big difference. And if I had figured that out 10 years ago, I could have moved a lot faster. And then I think the other thing, which is not unique to women, and a lot of what we're talking about, I think is over indexes with women, but isn't 100% unique to them, is that being authentic is totally good. It's not just okay. It is good. It is positive. It helps you connect with other people. It makes it so much easier. Like when you are the same you at home, it makes it much easier to work. Right. So I think that would be my advice if I could turn that clock back. What's yours? I'd love to hear. Curious.
Mine's a little different. I don't think I've struggled with imposter syndrome as much. I think what I have struggled with is like, again, maybe some upbringing stuff here, but like the idea that it's hard work, like just work hard. I literally have a quote I remember growing up. Maybe you remember this one, but if you just work hard, someday somebody will notice you. Like, I don't know when I heard that quote, but that was one that stuck with me. And just, I did work hard, and like, working hard, I thought was kind of the answer to everything. And like, I think now, yes, hard work was important, but now the insight I have is that, right. I mean, I don't know, right now, hard work is like 25% of the game for me. I would say the rest of the game is relationships, really being like intentional and having like good relationships above, below, and like at the same level as you. Networks of people, like that matters so much right now. And then also when you show up being able to improvise and kind of perform. So like we're on Zoom, it's a little performy, right? Like, especially in the virtual world, it's like you have to kind of show up, like, we did our hair today. We showered, like, because we're gonna, so like I think that ability to show up and have that energy and that performance, and to be able to improv based on who's in the room and like what people are saying, like especially at this level of leadership, that's like, I don't know, I'd say a third, a third, a third. The hard work piece maybe is more at the beginning. But I used to think that was like 100% of what mattered. And I really don't see it that way anymore.
Yeah, I love that. Wait, can I want to add on, and I'm gonna give you a little something. So I'm pulling this little piece of paper that sits beside my camera off, and I'm gonna put it up and show it and explain it. So this says B738 Eric. And what this means, so I have this beside my camera. Put it back up later. I have this beside my camera. I'm on Zoom all day. We'll talk later about remote work. I've worked remote for 10 years, right? I have this as a constant reminder to myself. And so this came from a speech that I heard in, I guess it was in December. This guy, Eric, I think it's Kapitulik, and he was like a former, I want to say Navy SEAL. I should know more of the details, but either way, he is this super inspirational, like impressive, has done amazing things guy. But what really stood out for me in his presentation, he showed us, he was talking about, he climbed Mount Everest, right? Of course.
That's what SEALs do. Yes.
Yeah. But forget about that. The cool part was he showed this picture of himself. It was kind of, a couple hours, I guess, after he got back to base camp or whatever. And he is just looking like rough and angry and beat and, all the things. And then he showed a picture of himself. So that picture was at like 7:31 or whatever. And then he showed a picture of himself, which was at 7:38, which is what I have on my sticky. And he was like holding up a thermos and like smiling and whatever. And the reason he showed that and what he was trying to get across is that he was the leader. He was the leader of the crew that was going up the mountain, the whole thing, is that like, as a leader, sometimes even when you are feeling beaten down and exhausted and all of those things, like that is not the face that you show to your team, your company, or anything. Like, so anyway, that is my reminder to myself that like when it's tough, right? And the last couple of years have been tough and leaders aren't immune to that, but like you have to show up. And I want to project 7:38 Eric, which was smiling.
I like that.
Yeah, it was a good one. Anyway, I took this off
people
track.
Don't, and people don't, and there was a study showing this with doctors and patients too. Like, patients love when doctors share positive things with them, but they don't really want to hear the negative stuff. So like if the patient comes in, it's like, oh, I had a terrible day, I didn't sleep at all. They don't want to hear your doctor say, oh yeah, I didn't sleep either, right? So it's kind of that thing, how you show up is really important.
Yeah, exactly. I love that as a learning. What do you want to, let's talk a little bit. I just kind of brought it up ad hoc, but you want to talk a little bit about the last couple of years? And I think this pandemic, right? So we're recording this in January of 22. So we're coming up on 2 years. Obviously a tremendous amount has happened in the world, in business. I guess maybe I'll let you start. I've got lots of thoughts, but like, how has that impacted you as a leader?
Yeah. And I'll give a little preface too, just for some context, between the two of us. I mean, my kids are right now, give a little thumbs up on the screen. My kids are middle school and high schoolers, and your kids are elementary schoolers. So I think the experience of COVID has also been really different, like depending on family situation. But I'll say what I have noticed the last 2 years as a leader, and what I've heard other leaders say, interestingly enough, is that people got very like hyper focused on what mattered. It was like the more time you had, the more space to like focus on what mattered, and like permission to stop doing stuff. I think that, being cooped up inside, or, it gave us the chance to say, I don't really want to do that anymore. And then for me personally, I think what I rediscovered during the pandemic is how important creativity is. And like that actually is something that's really important to me in a leadership role. And the leadership roles I'm in right now are actually more creative, I would say, than they are subject matter expert kind of roles, or C-suite leadership role. Like I'm finding that the creativity is actually what is the most valuable right now, and finding ways in the last 2 years to kind of get back to some creative things I had done when I was younger, like when you and I were in school together, or some new creative things. I've actually found that that's this strange like fuel that seems to be improving the quality and like what value I'm providing to others. So what about you? Tell me, because you've had more of the whirlwind of little kids and all that.
Whew, yes. So I think a lot of, yes. So for me personally, I think one thing that so it was one thing that started, so my kids were little, right? So when this all began, my daughter was turning 4 and my son was 5. And all of a sudden they were home. And had you asked me, like so many parents 2 months before, can you do your job with your children at home? I would have said like, you're absolutely insane. And that's even with my work environment has always been flexible and outcome oriented. And it's fine if I work at whatever, all of those. I was very fortunate in that way, but I still would have said that is absolutely impossible. And I think one thing I was forced, and then my kids were home, right, for a year, I guess a year plus before we put them back in the school building. And I think one thing that I figured out that was already happening as a leader, but this amplified it times a million, was just the importance of balancing time and having structure. And, I started my, like this insane 4:15 wake up routine of, that was the only way I was going to get it all done. Right. And still have some time for me, even if it was at 4:30 in the morning. And that has stuck, which is, even now the kids are back in school, like I'm still doing all of
4:15.
Oh yeah. Every morning. Your son was up this morning at 4:15, by the way.
That's a whole other story. Yes.
We were texting, but, so, I think, but I do think carving out that time for yourself as a leader that is the underlying message that I think I'm trying to send, and figuring out, and it's going to mean something different for everyone, like you go out and walk the dog in the evening for an hour and get some time. Like I do my thing early in the morning. So I think personally it is a lot of that. I think as in terms of, as a leader and in general, I think this brought and you've always been closer probably to kind of mental health stuff, right? Given the nature of your job.
Yes.
Which
obviously I'm a psychiatrist for those who don't know me. Yes.
I was going to say, we should have started there. So
I should have said that.
I run client services for a marketing agency. So, but I think really understanding the place of mental health in the workplace and the importance of paying attention to that, and really leaning into empathy. And I think also, as the workforce ages, right, and we've got more Gen Z, less Gen X in the workplace. Again, that's a whole other topic.
Gen X.
Woo, right. We love Gen Z too. But, I think Gen Z is also, I think the interesting thing about a lot of this is that they also are demanding a lot of this, right? This is important to them. Yeah. This is table stakes for Gen Z, is a company that cares about their mental health and is empathetic to them. And the pandemic has like amplified it in a lot of ways. But I think that is something that for all leaders, like we've got to take with us when hopefully we are out the other side of this at some point.
And, that's a great, one thing I've noticed, and I did have a lot of like psychiatry and psychotherapy training. And so one nice thing for me has been to apply that and be able to explain to people that like empathy is a skill, right? As well as a temperament, and you can develop it, but it's also like exhausting. And even if you're really empathetic, sometimes the people that are the most empathetic are the ones that get the most exhausted because they take on the emotions of others. And so it's even more important to have time to yourself. It's even more important to like recharge, because the more you have to be empathetic, especially virtually where you have to think harder about your body language and your voice, it's exhausting, and empathy fatigue is real. And like, that's something that we get trained on. And most people obviously never get that training. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because it's wonderful to have the focus on mental health and empathy, but you also have to know that like, it doesn't just happen. And you can't expect people to just be empathetic 12 hours a day on Zoom.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really good point. We, at one point, kind of during all of this, we on our leadership team, we kind of started referring just internally within ourselves to like our HR team. We were like, they're the first responders. and you know, you gotta
so
respect what the first responders are, while also dealing with, they're also going through the pandemic as human beings, and they're doing all of this. Like, it is a lot.
Right. All right, let's do a couple more leadership things, and then I know the speed round. Let's talk about Chief, because I know we're here with our like Chiefs logo, and I should mention, I don't know if you got it. I also have a Chief bathrobe, but I thought that might be inappropriate for a public video.
We'll see. Maybe that's like
next time,
some other topic. Yes.
So Chief. So you know, we wanted to talk a little bit about Chief, and you recommended me to Chief, so that's how I found out about it. And I'll just say, you know, I think I joined because, you know, watching you grow in your career, and like, I've just been so impressed with everything you've accomplished. And you said, hey, I'm part of Chief, and they're just supporting me and helping me grow. And I just get this wonderful feeling, and these women are amazing. And that's what made me curious and want to join as well. So, especially like you and I are in very different sectors, as you mentioned briefly. Like, I'm a doctor by training, I'm in healthcare, I do like consulting. You're in marketing, doing like virtual, I can't even describe it well. I should be able to say it better. But like, I really like the idea that Chief could like give me connections in different sectors and kind of introduce me to new things I haven't thought about. I could learn a lot, kind of the idea of cross-pollination. So like, that's how I got to Chief, but I want to hear how your story.
Yeah. So I remember I first heard of Chief when so I was living in New York at the time.
Right.
And they launched in New York. And I think I first saw the kind of posting somewhere on LinkedIn. It got targeted to me, or somehow, I actually don't remember the exact first trigger, right? But I saw it and I clicked on it, and pretty immediately I was like, oh. And it's interesting because when I think about how Chief positions itself and why Chief exists and all those things, like, I am such the use case that they are talking about, because one of the things with Chief when it launched, I mean, so right, mission is get more women into positions of power and keep them there. But one of the things that, at least in the early days, they talked about a lot was, you know, there's all these professional groups like this. There's, you know, EO and YPO. There are many of them, but in the majority of them, they are 90% male. And so, you know, they're still the same kinds of positions, all of that, but like, it's the same dynamic as most companies have at the top of the organization, where there's a couple women in a room of mostly men. And so there are some limitations, I think, on the conversation. And I was like the exact example of that, because in my senior leadership team and looking at it, the founder was in EO, the president was in YPO, and, you know, both males, right? So it spoke to me very directly. And I did also know a lot about the value that EO and YPO had brought to those two men I worked with so closely. And so I understood how it worked. And then when I found out it was in New York and it was women, it seemed to be the right thing to do. And so I joined. So my group is number 33, because, you know, they number the groups. So
you were like right at the beginning. You were
pretty much at the really early. Yeah. And it's been amazing because over time, so it's been a couple of years, and a couple of people dropped off from my initial group, but 4 of us are still together. Another one who is no longer in Chief, but we all still are on, you know, our like OG Chief text thread. And actually the woman who left is still a great support for me. And then we merged groups about a year ago because our group had gotten so small. We merged with another group who had been under similar circumstances and have actually, and I was definitely a little hesitant about that at first. And like, we have an amazing kind of full newly blended group. And like, it's like my brain trust. And we just had a call this week, and we were all talking about just kind of accomplishments and where we've come over the last 2 years. And we were like, wow, it's
a lot. You've really done a lot in the last couple of years. I mean,
yeah. So I have loved it for that. And just, it's safe too. I think one thing that our group talks
Yeah.
about a lot is like, there's no posturing, and that's how it's been from day one. No one was trying to impress people. No one was trying to one up other people. It's always been really safe, really authentic. And that is just not something you can find with a peer group very easily these days.
Well, I have one more question I really want to make sure we get to, because this one I thought about, and I know you have thoughts about it too. So I have a daughter who is 13. You have a daughter who is just turned
about to turn 6. Yes. Yeah, I had to stop.
I know, right? Like I have to stop and think too, just my pause. So when you think about, I think about my daughter, you think about your daughter. When you think about women who are early in their career, or like you imagine what they'll be like in the next 10, 15 years or something like that, and they say, I'm interested in being a leader, what would you say to them? I'm curious, like after all this, like, what would you say?
Ooh, that is a good one. I think I would say, first, I would absolutely say to them, like, that you can do that. Right. And I know, knowing, any woman, but knowing both of our daughters, like they are little powerful women in
they
training.
Are, yes.
But, I think I would also, I would ask them a little bit, tell me why. Right. I think you have to, if this is going to be your path in your career, I think you have to want it for the right reasons. And, a 13-year-old or a 6-year-old isn't going to say, like, I just want to be at the top. Like, it's a competitive thing. And I think
might.
Well, right. Again, like Monopoly boards getting over, like a whole other story.
Oh, that's a great story for another day. Yeah.
But yeah, I think that, I would talk to them about, well, tell me what's exciting about that. And I would really want to understand that. And I would really, we talked a little bit earlier about authenticity. And I think that is the most important thread to me, which is to say to them, like, awesome. You want to be a leader, like you go out there, you be yourself, care about other people. And like, those two things, plus look, the hard work isn't the only thing, but it is a thing, you do those things, you're willing to do that. Like, and that is something you get enjoyment out of, then that's a great path for you. And I think I would also coach them, and I would have never thought this, again, per our earlier conversation back at the time, but I think I would tell them, like, find that network of people to surround yourself with. I love the adage that, you are the blend of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. And I think kind of in your like leadership journey, I think that is really important. You need to be surrounded by people who are going to lift you up and who are trying to grow and progress and do all these things in the same way that you are. What would you say? You might have a better answer than that.
No, they're different. They're different. I think a lot of that makes sense to me. Especially the way kind of tying with authenticity. Like if you're going to do it as you. Yes. Don't do it like somebody. I think that's actually really thought provoking. What I was thinking is actually, I know it's kind of controversial, the idea of leaning in, right? But to me, like what that means, I kind of like that idea. And the reason I like it is because I think I would encourage them to keep thinking big. Like, don't think small, think big. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to try things and like move on. You don't have to like know what you want to do for the rest of your life when you're 13 or 18 or 20 or 30 or 40, 50, like it's okay to try new things. I feel like a lot of women I've met focus on obstacles. And I read an interesting study about women getting interviewed. And it said that women getting interviewed, and this is probably a chief podcast, what I'm thinking of, that women getting interviewed for C-suite jobs tend to get asked a lot about like obstacles and how they would overcome them. Whereas men being interviewed for the exact same job, same people, get asked questions about how they would grow the company and like very future growth questions. And I see that a lot. Like, I feel like women focus a lot on obstacles and how to overcome, as opposed to seeing opportunities and growth. And so I would my challenge to lean in would be to think big, like don't think about all the obstacles, think about the opportunities, like have that vision ahead of you, even if you don't get there, or even if the vision changes, or, you know, you mess up along the way. And then I think the other thing, which I'm very vocal about, sometimes like maybe too vocal about, but I think that like your decision to be something else other than professional, whether that's like a wife, a mother, a caregiver, an artist, mountain climber, you know, like whatever you want to be, like that should absolutely not limit what you want to be professionally.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean you don't have to figure out how it's going to work, or like when you're going to do this or that, or wake up at 4 a.m, or like, it doesn't mean that you don't have to like put some effort in, but I really think you should be always thinking big. Like, I don't have to limit myself because I want to have this other part of my identity. And just kind of push to keep thinking bigger, because I feel like even 2022, society and other people try to keep women small.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
you know, there's a lot going on politically we could talk about, but there's still this weird pressure to keep women small. And so you always have to be pushing like bigger to kind of like counteract that.
And you did have a better answer than I did on that one, because I love that. I think two things that you just said that really jump out to me. I think number one, it's okay to have a bunch of different steps in your journey. You don't, once you jump into one thing, like it doesn't mean that's what you need to do for life. And if you're in it for 5 years, 6, whatever, like, and you decide you want to just pivot, like life is short, right? You can, I mean, I feel like I've had several professional lifetimes. And then I think the second thing that you said is the last thing you said about thinking big is super, super spot on. And I think you're totally right. Like that interview question, I think is fascinating and totally screwed up, but probably totally true. But I think, yeah, you're right. And to me, that also ties in a little bit with like the authenticity stuff, right? If that's you, and you've got all this other parts of you, then do it, you know,
bring it.
Exactly. I think of a woman who I work with. So Tess, I'll give a shout out to you if she ever watches this, but she is amazing because she is amazing professionally, but she is a climber, like a serious badass climber. She is really passionate about helping young women understand financial success and what that means. And she kind of has this amazing side hustle where she does that. Like, and she is super unapologetic about any of this, you know, and that is her, and that has nothing to do with who she is at work. And that might make some people uncomfortable, right? But I think you're right. I think that is how we should all be thinking.
Right? And I should pause too, for anyone who's like perhaps young and watching this and thinking about like how they're going to get started. And we should point out like our majors in college as compared to what we do now. So I'll start. So I started out as a music performance major in college, and then I became a French major. And I had both of those majors before I decided to get into science in my like junior and a half year of college. And you are even more unusual.
Yeah. But P.S. I actually didn't remember that you were a music performance major. That's amazing. Yeah, I have a double degree in biology and environmental science and policy. And then I worked in for-profit education for about 5 years. And then I had this whole entrepreneurial journey and had like a handbag business that was pretty successful for 7 or 8 years. And now here I am running client services for a marketing organization. So yeah, you're totally right. Like one choice does not dictate the rest of your life by any means.
Awesome. This is so fun. I feel like we could do this for hours and hours and hours, but let's do the speed round. Okay. So we came up with a couple questions for speed round. So I'll just read the questions. Speed round, you give me your answer and I'll give my answer. Sound good?
Let's do it.
Okay. Speed round. What was the last professional development book you read?
Think Again by Adam Grant. Good one.
Not mine. I just read that one too. I read The Culture Code by Daniel Coyle.
Also a good one. I've read that too.
Great minds think alike. Okay, here's another good one. Hybrid, remote, or in person?
Remote forever.
Oh, I said hybrid all the way. I'm very excited about hybrid. Interesting. And you've been remote for 10 years?
10 plus years. Yeah. And I've always said I'm never going back to an office. And 3 years ago, half the people I knew thought that was insane. And now, here we are.
And I used to be in an office, 100 hospitals and offices 100% of the time, went virtual pandemic. And now I don't even know what I am, hybrid-ish, I guess. Okay. Well, here, I'm going to do this speed round, last TV show binge and why you liked it.
This is kind of embarrassing. It's not exactly a binge, but I've been very on top of the Sex and the City reboot and just like that. It's a bit cringeworthy. However, I do like it because I very much was into the original. And I am not in the 50s generation, I'm in 40s. Like it is just fascinating for me to kind of watch these characters, people I knew in their 20s, in their 50s, even as cringeworthy as a lot of it is.
Cringeworthy. I think that's what binge is about.
Yes.
So my last binge was Cobra Kai. And the reasons I am kind of obsessed with it is that it's like super 1980s nostalgia, right? And then also all of the characters are kind of ambivalent. Like they're all kind of villains and heroes and like you don't know who to like. And like I kind of find that really fun.
I love it. I have not yet watched that, but
oh, 80s goodness. Okay. And final question, what is your dream vacation?
I've been thinking about this one a lot because it started running again. I really want to go on the Orient Express.
Oh, I like that idea. Mine is actually not that different. So mine is to take one of the old-fashioned wood boats up the Nile and to go to all the archaeology sites on the Nile and to have a pen. I went to Penn, have a Penn archaeologist as my guide to like spend 2 months going up the Nile.
That's amazing. I wonder what it says that there's like this common thread of like, the vintage vacation or trip. I don't know,
either Agatha Christie, I don't know, maybe it's an Agatha Christie thing, or maybe it's just nostalgia of some kind.
Yeah, I don't know, but I was actually looking it up the other day. I was like, we were watching some Agatha Christie remake, and then I went the whole way down a phone hole. But I've been thinking about the Orient Express for a long time, but it's been very, very renewed. So I'm gonna do it.
All right, well, Sarah, so fun to spend this time as a fellow chief. I love you. I admire you. This has been fun for me. And it's just been nice for me to see you grow. And I'm so happy that Chief has helped you.
Oh, ditto. I don't know how to top that, but I love you. As I have said forever, you know how I'll end it. You are my idol.
Oh, well, before we get teary, we'll say goodbye. Have a wonderful weekend. And hopefully if anybody was watching, we were able to make you smile a little bit.
Bye.